Hey there, kids. I know it's been a hot minute. I have been off working on some stuff. Things have been just a little bit sporadic with the old podcast lately, but I am going to make it up to you. This week I have an extra special guest. It is the great Skye Wallace. Skye is just a terrific artist out of Toronto. Skye has produced several really terrific records. And I saw Skye open actually for Matt Mays, and the Skye Wallace band just knocked me on my freaking butt, man. If you have seen Skye perform, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so we got into this really excellent chat about Skye's music, where it comes from, about influences, about mental health and depression, about working with Hawksley Workman, which is not related to mental health and depression. Really super chat with a really super and insightful and articulate human being. You don't need me going on about it. The proof is in the auditory pudding. So please do enjoy what was a privilege for me, which was sitting down for a chat with the great Skye Wallace.
John Huff Podcast.
Skye Wallace, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I had it all laid out, how I was going to start this, where we were going to go. And then I'm listening to your song, Blood River 1918.
Ooh.
And that just changes everything for me.
Oh.
I bet you didn't know you were going to talk about that song when you got up this morning, did you?
Okay. No idea. I haven't, you know what? I don't even know if I would have to spend some time with a guitar in order to play that song again.
I'm not going to ask you to play it, but...
No, but... But I'm glad you brought it up, actually. My mom brings it up, not infrequently.
Really?
Because it's like one of her favorites from the vault. So thank you for listening.
Anybody who listens to my show knows that A, I'm a history person, B, my particular history hobby horse is the First World War. And so as soon as I saw 1918 in a title, I was like, what? Tell me what that song is about. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's about, I guess, and this was way pre-pandemic, but this was about the Spanish flu and just about like the impending, I guess it's like love in a time of impending doom and like trying to just like keep someone with you, keep them alive via your love, and feeling hopeless in the process, but just like trying to cling to that love in the process.
Where did that impetus come from? It must have been a pretty young Skye Wallace writing that song. Where did that come from?
I was also really into history. I actually went through like
yeah?
a long like series of like storytelling where my songs were about historical aspects or like inspired by stories that were from history instead of, you know, speaking from the first person or whatever. And I was so intrigued by it. I thought there was just so much breadth of like understanding that I didn't have of the past. And that's it just like lit my fire in that way where it's like, but love has, you know, love and all these feelings that I'm feeling have always been. And so like the disconnect from that point in time is just like vast and so interesting, to me anyway. And I think what got me about that particular subject matter was I saw this play. I went to UBC for 1 year before I dropped out of university. And but during that time, I was really into theater, and I saw a production that was like by the UBC BFA acting students, and it was Unity 1918.
Oh, interesting.
And it was all about this small town in the middle of nowhere trying to keep the virus out.
Right.
And then just like it was its own enemy. Like it was the enemy of the story because it kept just like lurking in the shadows, and that just was very profound and like rocked me a little bit. So I think that was the origin of my interest for
Well, I
1918 for
mean,
sure.
if you're going to start talking about writing in difficult times or writing about difficult times, I mean, we have our own issues these days. But when you think back to what was happening at that point in time, like we feel like the world is ending all the time, but my
Yeah,
goodness, having just gone through that war and then the Spanish flu comes, and you must have thought it was the end of days. All and what's it like
for sure.
to watch the world collapse the
For
way
sure.
it
And
did?
there's so much less control because like, like the modern medicine hadn't come to where it is now. And just as far as like transportation and communication too, like it's hard to know there's a lot more lurking in the shadows that's unknown. And that is so scary and feels like it's so beyond you feel so hopeless and it's beyond your control because you don't have that information. So
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
No Twitter. I mean,
No
how
Twitter.
did they survive? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
the temptation is to get very political very quickly, and I'm not going to.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But
I
I was
actually
just
haven't gone on Twitter for a long
I
time.
quit Twitter many years ago. I just like nah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I quit TikTok too.
Good for you.
That shows my age, kind of.
Mm,
I tried with the
that's
TikTok.
you can only do so much
I feel
in
like
this life, you know?
somebody in your position maybe has more obligation to TikTok, let's say, than somebody in my position. I get it. As an artist, I understand the kind of pressure you probably feel to be making content all the time. And
Yeah. The good thing is that I feel like because yes, for sure that exists in like a big way, but I was like, how can this be um how can this feel like something that I am like self generating that I'm like motivated to make. And
mm,
so it's kind of like, and I tell people this who are like, how did you get into TikTok, for instance, just as an example? And I think like I'm going to preface this with like artists are expected to do too much and there's always more. And like that's that I have my own issues with that. But I've gotten to a point now with TikTok where I'm like, oh, I actually like enjoy making the process, like the creation process, the potentialities for reaching people I wouldn't have otherwise. And I'm doing all my like dumb, funny stuff as well. And it's just stuff I find interesting. But it took years of like probably like over the pandemic, 2 or 3 years of me trying to find my voice and like, crying 50% of the time I was making content. So I always tell people that I'm like, yeah, if you're willing to go through that, it might not be that way for you, but it certainly was for me. And I'm pretty open about that.
that's interesting. I mean, we're going to talk about so many things, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a sense, particularly in your more recent music, about you just kind of, in a sense, I think coming home to yourself and doing things your way and being okay with that. And I think the TikTok story falls right in line with that. It's like there's a pressure to do it a certain way, and that
Yeah.
sucks. And that's
Yeah.
not inspiring and that's not fun. Here
No.
you are, probably tried to do that game
Yeah.
and had to come around to, well, no, I'm going to do it my way, like
Mm-hmm.
Frankie. And that falls in line. That makes sense. The more I kind of learn about you and the more I listen to you, it's like at the end of the day, with everything you do, you've got to kind of do it your way and
For
be okay
sure.
with that. And I know that
Yeah.
that's got to be difficult at times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of us, like a lot of us artists, like we like authenticity is really important,
Right.
but also authenticity has become kind of a, like currency online because it's so hard to convey and tap into that authenticity
Right.
amidst everything else. So it's like, yeah, if you can, that's huge, but it takes a lot to get there. And if you're so if you're trying to like imitate authenticity, that's where
Right.
my blocks kind of landed, where I was like, I have to promote this, but I have to be authentic. And I would look at it and at the end of the process and be like, oh, that's not authentic. That's not my actual voice. That's not me
Right.
being honest or whatever. And so like that was where a lot of the like just the rock and the hard place for me in content creating came from. And so now, yeah, I think that was the key is just like through much digging, finding like where that authentic place lies and like how I can access it without.
Yeah,
hating
authenticity as a marketing plan. It just doesn't seem to, it doesn't run together very well.
No.
And I didn't intend to talk about any of that, but it's just sort of the way things go.
Yeah.
You've been on my radar for a very long time.
Oh, cool.
And as a musician in the Ontario scene, your name has been coming up for a very long time, you know.
Cool.
But it got more intense in 2019 when I saw you open for Matt Mays.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I watched you and your band and I thought, they're just kicking ass, man. It's so rare to see an opening act like really come in and crush that way. And
thank you. Wow.
that was so good. And it's just like, I started paying a lot more attention after I watched that show. And then, you know, a pandemic quickly followed, but I made a playlist as well shortly. This podcast started in 2019, so it was around the same time. And I made an indie rock playlist and I put Death of Me on it. So Skye Wallace has been, you know, part of my life musically since then. And so that makes today a real treat for me. It's one of the cool things about having a show like this is that you get access to people a little bit. And from the very beginning, I'm like, make a note of Skye and see if we can get her. And here you are. So welcome.
Hell yeah. Well, that means a lot. And also I'm just stoked to be here. So thank you for arranging this and for, you know, I'm excited to chat.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And we're going to chat.
Yeah.
And I'd like to start things off usually with something pretty light and simple. So I'm going to read you a quote about your song Tough Kid, which has become one of my favorite songs, actually, by the way. It's such a good song.
Thank you.
Tough Kid, a song written for any kid who has been told they aren't allowed to be who they really are, that they aren't good enough. I wanted this song to be a reminder to them that they've got a power in them that they might not believe in yet. And so my soft question for you, Skye Wallace, is, who are you not allowed to be?
I mean, that's the big question, eh? I think I am in a spot where I'm largely able at this juncture in my life, I'm able to explore all the pieces of myself and embody those pieces and feel confident and not beholden to anyone, to just go my own way. And I think I wrote that song while kind of cracking through that last barrier that, you know, that I think it comes with getting older. It comes with going through many, you know, life experiences. But I think that everyone should have that. And I think everybody has, you know, some sort of box that they're kept in via expectations, via society, via just like safety, and many more than the barriers I had at any given time. So like, I just wanted to, I guess, roar about that, that everyone's owed that feeling of breaking through all of those and just being unequivocally who they are. And that is what we are all owed as people.
Interesting. Was there a particular catalyst for that? Was there a moment, or was it just something that came along?
It was interesting. It was, I think this was the second song. So I started writing with Hawksley Workman.
Yeah.
And the first song that we wrote was the song that came out a couple of months ago called Momentum.
We're going to talk about that one too.
Yeah, okay. Well, we just got together and that came out. And then I don't know, I was going through I was really making some shifts in my life just with, you know, lots of different things. And I was feeling so confident and I was feeling so excited. And it was like what you said earlier of just like feeling as though I could shuck the confines of where I needed to fit, be it musically, personally, like all these things. And I just realized that like what mattered to me truly, and then the rest could fall away. And that was so liberating. And so I had this like newfound, like maybe a little out of control, like fire lit inside.
The people can't see you smiling as you say that, which is too bad.
it was crazy. I was like, am I good? Like so high energy. And I was excited. I was like, especially working with Hawk, like he was really he reached out to me and we became such good friends very fast. And I looked up to him so much. And then these songs started coming out where we had no intention of writing a whole whack of songs. We had no intention of co-producing a record. That was to come. So we were just like writing these songs and I was feeling like in my element. And he was so like, wow, your element is great.
Oh, nice.
Like that kind of thing. And just like the respect, but also the inspiration that we both kind of fed off of each other in the room. Like it was pretty magical. And so this was this place where all these songs were coming from. And I was like asking those questions of like, okay, what really matters? I went through all of those things, be it social media or just putting your music out there. It's like, I think I got so caught up in where do I fit? And that it's neither here nor there, I am me and you are you. And I think that especially as artists, we like our category is ourselves, and genre more or less is not dead but fluid now. And I think there's a power in just being yourself because everything's on the global stage now. There's so much noise to break through as far as the online world goes. So the only thing that you can do that nobody else can do better is your thing. So to follow that line I think that was like a liberating power moment realization for me. And this was kind of cracking that. And I wanted everybody to have that.
It's so important to recognize your own thing, but so few people actually do.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to find your own thing too.
Oh yeah,
that's
for sure
whole
it is.
Process of like digging and seeing what what inspires and what threads you're inclined and compelled to follow.
It's also hard to trust that like for me, it's very difficult. Is it okay? Like, is this it? Does this feel right? And is that cool? Like, I've found that as a podcaster, I'm a drummer. I perform with people. And it's like, well, what sort of drummer am I actually? And is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, am I me or am I doing a bad job? Is it something that I've thought in my head before where it's like, is this good? Or am I being
Have you experienced any kind of a pressure from the industry to be a certain way?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, the music industry is so wild. I saw a Chapel Rowan interview recently where she was like, this is an industry that really rewards you if you don't protect yourself.
Oh, wow.
Like if you decide not to protect yourself. And I think I was going through that of like, because it's also about sustainability and just like, you're required to give so much of yourself for the art, for the career. And sometimes it feels like it takes more than it gives.
Right.
Because you're like, where's the sustainability? Like, why am I doing this? Why did I do this in the first place? It's been 15 years, like that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of, there's pressures based on where you want to land. And there's not a ton of places to land that, money is one thing, but just like sustainability in general, like it's a very strange landscape right now as far as that independent emerging all the way to like almost like working class, like, like the road dogging. It's just like a very different world now. Yeah. So to break through is a feat unto itself. So you're like, okay, where can I land that would make sense for me to like generate just like a place for me to make my next steps. And then you're like, okay, am I going to radio? Okay, then it needs to be this, 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 and this. And it has to like be in this certain thing. And then maybe I will stand a chance of getting added. That kind of thing where it's like, you want to see your audience find you as well. That's what I sometimes get in my head about for online stuff. It's just like you have to find your niche so often. And I'm just like, okay, well, what is my niche? I need to like be my niche. I need to create my niche. I need to like, where do I fit? But I think the thing is like shucking that and just like, you will create a space that you fit on your own by just being yourself. So yes, there are a lot of expectations, but also there's a lot of expectations that I put on myself. I know a lot of artists struggle with that, with just like being your own worst critic. And
Of course.
you know, it's hard to parse in your head which is like what is coming from where, but
Right.
you have to sit through it anyway.
It's difficult.
Mhm.
It's a process. But you're working with Hawksley Workman, legend. Man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
With these songs, Momentum, Tough Kid, when were you working on those? Was this deep in the heart of the pandemic?
No, it was actually early 2023. So
Okay.
like late winter, early spring 2023.
What's at that point in time, how are you feeling about things? Before this sort of surge of, where were you at that point in time?
Yeah, I mean, I had just released a record in the fall,
Mm-hmm.
and I had kind of run myself ragged with a tour, like a pretty lofty tour at the time, where it was like Germany and some just surrounding countries in
We're going to
Europe,
talk about Germany too,
Netherlands.
because
Yeah,
I've played there quite a bit.
Oh yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. Wild, beautiful place to
Oh, it's
play.
great. Yeah.
And so I did that, and then I did a cross country tour in Canada, like the whole thing, and it was like snowy, and everybody was talking about like, hey, like every press was just like, hey, touring's so unsustainable now. How are you doing it? I'm just like, barely.
Yeah. Thanks for
Can we
bringing
talk
that
about
up.
the music? Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah. We don't need reminded, okay?
Yeah. So I was at the end of that process, and it was my first time, you know, with a bigger label and things like that. So it was brand new to me, and at the end of the process, I was just very burnt out, I
Yeah.
think,
Mm-hmm.
and struggling with that thing we were talking about earlier of just like trying to wrestle with being authentic. Because if you're not yourself online, or if you're not like just generating things from your gut, it's so much extra work and
Sure.
energy. And
And
so I was like,
calculation and
yeah. Yeah. So I burnt out, and then I was there, and I was like, okay, where from here? Like, who am I? Who am I?
right. Right.
I think the catalyst that I like to talk about, and there's a song on said record, which isn't announced yet. I keep doing this. I'm like,
Oh, really?
there's a record, but it's not announced yet, but it'll be soon. So like, whatever, we can talk about it.
This is, hey, you say whatever you want or don't want. It's okay.
Yeah. But there's just one song on it, and it was like the first song that I think I wrote from this group of songs was, like I also, as many artists do, struggle with like anxiety and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been, getting my toolkit together for so long. I'd done everything possible, and I actually was trying like meds for the first time in January 2023. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try it because nothing else has been working, and it's been so much energy to try and make everything work. But I wrote this one song that's called "You Don't Still Have a Hold on Me." And I think it was that moment where I was like, oh my God, I can feel it. They're working. And suddenly this kind of dread that lived in my stomach for my whole life, I realized I was a very anxious kid. Like I was up at night worrying about like my parents dying or the Black Plague coming back from like a really early age. I don't know, just very dour. But
History is dangerous for kids.
right. Yeah, exactly. It is. But I suddenly felt it not there. And there was a gap, unoccupied space there where it wasn't. And I was like, that's brand new. And so the song that I wrote, that I ended up writing, is kind of a breakup song, like the death of my anxiety, and seeing it as like like you've been there the whole time. And so there is a strange fondness. I think we all have, a fondness or like a muscle built up for where we end up, where we find our solace. And sometimes the easiest thing is that that comfort of anxiety and sadness, or whatever it is, that how it manifests. But this was it was kind of like this weird, okay, I'm breaking up with you kind of thing. And it was a beautiful moment. But I like to talk about it a lot because I think a lot of people also struggle. And I'm not a person where it's like, yes, drugs are the answer, but I think it's like a tool to try. And for me, it gave me enough of a break to have some solace in just being and recuperating and being able to see the way forward. That was really beautiful. So I think that was a big catalyst.
If you've never had just kind of this sense of peace before, suddenly feeling it must be very strange indeed.
So strange. That's right. Yeah, that's what it was. It was a sense of peace. And I was like, what? What's missing?
I've had it too. I mean, I've been very public on this program about my own reckoning with anxiety, especially during the pandemic. It reached a pretty fevered pitch. And
yeah, I'm sorry.
I sort of, well, it's not just me, and thank you, but there comes, you don't even realize how intense it is until it's not there, right? And I can remember a couple of times just sort of snapping out of it, coming back into what I call real reality. Not anxiety is like in my experience, it's a fake reality. It's all of your fears that are not happening but feel as though they are.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it takes over you. It becomes in control of you. And then there came a moment where I felt suddenly in control of myself again. It was like a fever breaking, and you just sort of wake up like, where am I? And the relief in that moment I can't even really describe it. And I mean, the anxiety came back, but you had these brief moments of sort of peace, and it's like, oh, wow, this is how life is supposed to feel.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. The other way is so hard.
Right? And it's so tight and intense. And like I'm getting misty just thinking about that feeling, coming out of that.
The fever is a really beautiful metaphor because it is so like, you feel just like the heat under your skin, the prickliness, everything is just so, and you don't even realize it until it's gone a lot of the time. You don't realize the severity, like, you're anxious, sure. But then like, if you're going through, once it's gone, then you can attest.
It becomes normal, right? Like a sound in the background that you didn't know was there until it's gone. Yeah. And this becomes for decades, people live this way. It just becomes normal, and it's so unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's so
oh my God.
damaging, and physically it's exhausting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually a pivotal point for me where I was like, am I killing myself? Am I like going to be, is this like probably bad for my health, just like the amount of like just my adrenal system alone.
It's terrible. It's toxic.
Yeah. And I think everybody has their own journeys with this that are it's good to talk about. So thank you for all, for sharing your story on this podcast. I think it's a good thing.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing therapy for years, but that took me a minute.
Yeah.
There was a point in time where I had a doctor say to me, and it wasn't anxiety at that point. There was some mild depression. There was just a lot of, I don't know what I'm doing. And it was bothering me. Yeah. I mean, in life, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So a lot of it didn't feel very good. And I had a doctor say to me, well, you should just go see a therapist. And I had immediate resistance to that. Like, the man thing. From 200 years ago. I'll go kill something. It'll be fine. And so I had this resistance too. And I think a lot of people of my generation, I'm older than you, probably do as well. And so it's like one of the reasons I talk about this is because it needs to be normalized to go to therapy or do what you need to do to look after yourself. And in your case, I mean, a lot of people go on the meds and it kills them creatively. Like it just flattens them. So I'm relieved to know that actually it sparked you.
Yeah. And I do want to also add that like I got lucky with that particular journey where like the first one I tried, which happened to be like on the lower dose side, like very not life altering. Like I don't have to do anything in order to, take these meds. And I know that some people have like a very long, very frustrating, very fraught journey with medication and like not finding the right one. And it's not as easy as all that. And this happened. I do want to preface this story with that. Like, I am extremely lucky that it just happened to click and be the right thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Because that's not always the case.
No, I mean, some people have a really, really difficult time, and
yeah.
I do not envy those people. I mean,
no, I mean, the medical system is, it's great that we have all access to all these things, but it's also certainly standardized and it can't be a one size fits all thing. And
no,
that's all we can.
It can't. And so I'm relieved that it worked that well for you. That's great.
Yeah. And creatively.
Yeah. Then great. Hawksley Workman calls you up and says, "Hey, you want to write?"
Oh my God. It was like, yeah, I think I can find the time. Right? Let me check my calendar. Meanwhile, I'm like,
no, that's, right now. I mean, it's so affirming when something like that happens. I mean, here you are, you've come off the road. We both know that coming off the road can be tough, and mentally it's tough. Physically it's tough. Mm-hmm. And then you're at this point where you're kind of burned out. Maybe you're questioning, do I continue with this? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, especially that was around 2022. It'd been 3 years of the pandemic, and that crushed so many people's creativity
so
and
many
lust for artist life. And yeah, for sure. And myself too went through. Right. I think we all did.
And mine, I didn't play for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then you question.
Yeah.
Do I go back? Is there any point? I don't venues closing everywhere and touring becoming so difficult.
Yeah.
So here you are in this place and you wonder, and it's just got to be so affirming to have a phone call from Hawksley Workman that says, "Let's work together." It's like, oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. We still have something here,
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm very lucky because I got into co-writing during the pandemic. I feel like I've had a lot of opportunity to collaborate with awesome people who have kept relighting that fire, not just Hawk, but just all the people that I've been lucky enough to either, do Zooms or when it was, chill, we could meet up in person and that kind of thing. I released a song with my buddy Tennyson King recently, and that was born of us just getting together and being like, hey, I'm it's like a gym buddy in a way, especially during the pandemic. Cause initially when that happened, I was like, I'm not playing my guitar. I'm not going to write. What am I doing? I don't feel like it.
Right. Of course.
I'm scared.
Right.
And so having these co-writing sessions, it was something I wanted to get better at. But it was okay, we're going to write today and we're going to make a song, and you have to show up because it's in the calendar. This person's going to show up. So you better show up. And I think that's really beautiful. And also co-writing, initially I was so scared of, but then I noticed how much of a healthy cycle it actually instills, where it's I thought it was going to be this person bringing something, the other person being I'm not sure. What about this? And I'm not sure. What about this? But it's actually I bring something to the table that normally if it was by myself, I'd be no, that's stupid. I'm going to roll it up into a little ball and throw it behind me into the wastebasket. But then the other person who's there is actually, let's talk about that. And then you get down to it and they're I love that. So it's almost you're back and forth, revving each other up and seeing the things in your own skill set and your own writing that you wouldn't see yourself. Sure. And so I think that was a huge keeping me on track as well. Yeah, that was very helpful.
There's a certain amount of letting go involved in that too, creatively. You can be a little less precious about things,
Big time. Right? Yeah, that's absolutely. Important. And I think it's important to not be super precious sometimes, that's to each their own for sure. But I just I think that I've heard this a lot of just you should be allowed to make bad art, and not to say that something that you create with someone is bad, but that's the fear, right? It's what if it's bad? And it's what if it's bad? Who cares?
What if it is?
You have to output. You can't just allow the things that are quote unquote good enough out, because you never know what it's going to become. And you never know. You also just have to get it out. It's like a weird, it's like a digestive system or something.
No, you've got to clear the pipes, right?
Clear the pipes.
And if you only sit around waiting for the perfect thing, that's just resistance. You'll sit there forever waiting. You'll produce nothing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, right?
Absolutely.
There's a lyric. See if you recognize this. I get the feeling like I'm letting go and I don't care what people think anymore. Does that sound familiar to you?
Sounds a little familiar. Where's that?
What's that from? That's a song I heard somewhere.
Yeah, that is my song Momentum. And that was the one I mentioned earlier. That was the first song that Hawk and I wrote together.
And it fits, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does.
There's this theme, a recurring theme happening here.
Yeah.
And it's about,
time.
well, what are you talking about letting go in that song? It's not just, I feel like it's not just whatever. Like what's happening there?
I think it was a lot of the things that we were talking about of just like shucking the confines of where people think you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. And I think it's so funny. You hit 30 and everybody's like, oh, you're supposed to not care about what people think anymore. And I was like, any day now, that'd be great. I don't, it's still there. And I think I just like, so, be it from things that happened or whatever, just like there's no rhyme or reason to why it kicks in, I'm sure. But like for me, it just like really kicked in where I think because of all those things that I had kind of like parsed in my head, and I was just like something shifted into place. And then I was like, oh, I can, like, it doesn't matter if you're weird, or it doesn't matter if you're like not doing things the quote unquote right way. Meanwhile, like trying to be very like, I like looking at the industry, and I think, there's a lot of people who will say like there are just like by the book ways of doing things, but it's kind of the Wild West right now, in my opinion.
I think I think too.
There's a liberation in that, because you can just like, hey, what do I want to try? That it doesn't matter if nobody else is doing it. Like if it's a flop, who cares? Nobody will remember it. And just like, throw something at the wall, whatever. And I kind of like, that's the spot where I think I got to, where I was like, okay, I'm going to write these songs. And other times I'd written songs and I was like, oh, where is it going to like, can this fit like a radio thing? Is this going to get me this or whatever, like to make take my career to the next level, which I think is important. It's you got to be a business as well. But also I was like, oh, I don't care if people like this song or not. I do. So that's great. Like, job done.
If you do kind of songwriting by numbers, most of the time you don't create something that endures, right?
Totally. It's like, and endures, that means that can be so different to whomever listens. You never know. Like, there's sometimes people will come out of the woodwork, like you with the Blood River 1918, and like, I've had people like pull out deep cuts and be like, hey, this got me through a really tough time in my life. And I'd be like, damn, there it is. Like a song I would think nothing of, but you never know how it's going to connect with people. And I think that's why I want to create, is because music really impacts me. It's very powerful on me and my moods, my mental processes, my emotions, and how I am in the world. And so I want to evoke that feeling in other people. I want to connect. I want to have those moments of like breaking down the barriers between us all and just feeling. So that's what was important. And I think if you can get into a place where you feel affected by the song that you're making, that will come through. And it doesn't have to come through to everybody, because that's impossible. Right. So, yeah.
Who was it when you were a kid? I mean, what was your intro to music? Who did this for you back in the day? I know one of the answers, but go on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've actually started talking about this a lot recently, because I've been hanging out with my parents, and like when I was really little, I'm just thinking about like my intro to music. Like I lived in a house with like 6 adults, and I was the first baby, kind of thing. Like it was my grandparents and my parents, and then my aunt and uncle who were in high school. And so I had this like breadth of musical influence. Like my grandfather's from Newfoundland, so a lot of the traditional music, but then a lot of, like Willie Nelson and Randy Travis and that kind of thing. My grandmother was always singing like, Scottish songs in the kitchen kind of thing. My parents, and my dad's in a Rush, and then my and my aunt was into Sloan, and like, so I had this like generational breadth of like intro to music. And I don't think I never, I mean, I got into like, the Spice Girls and the Backstreet Boys, and then eventually like made my way to like, I know it's a huge gap, but I got to punk music eventually.
Mm.
But I do think that there's such a value in having like I don't know, a broad range of like, oh, listen to this. Like, this is cool. So I'm really grateful for that. Because, even if there's not a ton of like people who play music in my family, but they all love music. And I got to see how, like, the many ways in which they got to enjoy it.
When did you figure out you could sing?
Oh, it's
Always
cliche.
singing?
I was one of those like, 18-month-olds who would just be like staring at the wall, being like, like weird. I was just inclined to sing. I think still, even if I decided not to pursue a music career, I think like I sing constantly. I sing and I don't even know I'm doing it. It's just like, it's like breathing.
Oh, wow.
But it does, it's like, it feels like finding my like center. It's just
Yeah.
something I've always done. And it's something that like, I think it's one of my communicating places. So I think it's just like, the vibration and everything like that. It feels very natural. So, yeah, singing to me has always been my zone, like my instrument. And I had some training as well. When I was older, like 8 to 15 kind of thing, but it really like solid foundations with technique.
Right.
And I certainly don't sing like that anymore, but it was like a very cool process of, we did operettas, we did like all these Kiwanis Festival competitions and things like that, which was really cool. But yeah, definitely ventured into different territory eventually.
Oh, that's interesting. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. What a journey.
I grew up in a singing household.
Oh,
I have 3 older sisters, and my mom, they're all terrific singers.
amazing.
And they used to sing. We were a church family, and they used to sing, and they would sing 4-part vocal harmonies, and they would it was really magnificent. And I can sing okay, but they could really sing. And it's just growing up in an environment like that kind of fine tunes you. But I was very reluctant to sing myself until I started kind of singing backups with people and whatever. But there's something very, I don't know, there's something soothing in it. There's something, being able to sing is kind of cool, And then when somebody can sing
Totally.
like you can sing, I mean, that's just another, wow,
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the mind that everybody can sing. It just will sound a little different
a little different.
from somebody else.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
like think of like the Strokes, or, like I'm trying to think of examples, but just like, people like Neil Young.
Right.
Technically, like, if that didn't exist out there and you sang like that, you'd be like, "Oh, is this okay?" But it's actually like there's so many ways of singing, and like your voice doesn't have to be like, quote unquote technically perfect. And I say this with songwriting too when I go into like schools and stuff, and I'm like trying to get kids to just like take the leap, because it is such a like foreboding task to take the
For
leap
sure.
and write a song. It's scary.
Yep.
But it's like there is no right way of doing it. Especially, like I had a lot of that technique learned early. But like, my grandfather, like he would always talk about like how raw the singers from his island would be. He was from Red Island in Placentia Bay, and just like how untrained and raw and how beautiful that was like these guys who would sing in that, traditional way. And I think there's merit to all kinds of whatever technique is, like it can, there's quote unquote correct ways of like writing a song, but really like do your own thing and like make those mistakes.
Of course.
And you never know what you're going to find in the cracks. You never know if you're going to be finding something completely new that nobody else would do if you make those mistakes. Like, what are mistakes even? I think that's like at this point juncture, like what separates us from like AI and things like that is the ability to make those very human like cracks and imperfections that lead us to new frontiers and explorations. And that's something that actually Hawk instilled in me as far as confidence goes for producing. as well, where like I'd never stepped into the producer role. I had very clear ideas and visions of what I wanted all of my songs to sound like. I heard them in my head kind of thing, but just like the language and also just like feeling comfortable saying that I'm actually doing it. That had been, a long time of me not doing that, and him putting that faith in me and being like, I'd say, what about this? And he'd be like, you know, technically, if you ask somebody, they'd be like, why would you ever do that? You really, really shouldn't do that. But I'm trying it here and it sounds incredible. So we're going to do that. And he was kind of like, he's such a seasoned professional and has done this so much and such a wide breadth of different kinds of music that he's worked on production wise. And so for him to be like, hey, that's refreshing, even if it's not right, it was kind of like, oh, okay, so it goes for this as well. And there's like, of course, so much that you do have to know is just as far as like, being able to navigate a DAW or something like that. But like within that, as you're learning, there's lots of little turnoffs that someone else might not have tried. So there's beauty in that.
Was Tough Kid the first one that you technically produced, or was it a different
It was
song?
Momentum.
It was Momentum?
But I will say that Momentum used to be way slower. It used to be like...
So it gathered momentum?
It gathered momentum. And you know what?
Sorry.
Yeah, it literally gathered momentum. We like upped the tempo so much, but also I got the chance to like tour it before it came out. So we toured when Tough Kid first came out in the fall. We did like a 6-week tour of like 8 or 9 countries. It was like started in the States and then we did like Germany, Netherlands, awesome. Denmark, awesome. Like Italy, UK, that kind of thing. And I got the chance to just like play that song over and over again with my band and actually reopened the song once we got back to be like, okay, this is where the song lies. And like they brought their voices to it, my bassist Jay Stratman and my drummer Chris Demas, and we'd been playing it, and it found this new personality, like this new version of itself that felt like home for the song and where I kind of wanted it to go. So then once we came back from the tour, we they came into the studio and they recorded their parts there on Momentum. So I'd say actually that Tough Kid was the one that was like the first song that we worked on that was co-production that really stayed in its zone.
I see. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Cause we were just, we were messing around, not sure to what extent this was going to be a final. A lot of the vocals are demo vocals. Like we redid a bunch of them, but there's a bunch of tracks here and there. Like everything is kind of mushed together because it was this like weird lightning in a bottle thing that we were vibing on. And, Hawksley's such a talented drummer as well. So we were kind of like collaborating. That gave me a chance to like, do engineering while he did that kind of thing. But it was really cool to have the different songs kind of find their zone in different ways. And I'm so grateful for my bandmates are awesome. So it was really great to be able to have them in the studio as well.
Amazing. Who played drums on Tough Kid?
That was Hawk.
Dude, the drums are so good on that song.
And
they sound so good.
Yeah.
Like they're produced and recorded so well.
Yeah. I mean, that's Hawk. Like he's crazy. Just to see him play too. Like he's just like power.
Really? Because the fills, they're just, for the most part, just like 16th note fills down the toms, but they fit so beautifully. And that song is so damn cool.
Thanks.
And I'm imagining you, I do this once in a while where I will hear a song and I'll be just like, that the songwriter was like smiling with a crinkled nose when they started writing that one. Like, oh, this is good, man.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a vibe.
And this, just that really simple guitar part that opens it. It's so vibey. It's so cool. And something different than I think you've done before.
Yeah,
a lot of the new stuff is different from things you've done before.
Definitely.
It's fun. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
I was just going to say it's fun to watch the way you've evolved from something like Blood River 1918 up to the brand new song, which is
Oh, Before the Afterlife.
Before the Afterlife, sorry.
Mhm. But it's funny, like I do think that there's it's all very brand new. Like it feels like a totally different, venture than I've done previously. But I also think there's like an element of culmination of everything I've done up to this point
Oh,
where
it
like
makes sense.
things
Yeah.
things like Blood River 1918, like that totally lends itself to Before the Afterlife in my mind, as far as like where my head was at and like where I was as a songwriter. And I think this whole process has been like a real taking account of like all the places that I've been up until this point and what got me here. And all the like crazy like sleeping on floors touring that I've done and all these like pieces. Like I've kind of like gone into many different genres. And so I wanted to do something that drew from all of that experience, and acknowledged all of that experience. And so there's this like collection of songs coming together that's like, yes, there's like lots of rock elements, but there's lots of not that as well. And it's like this kind of like fluid piece that is, everything kind of coming together. It's all informed by the greater whole. So I'm stoked on that.
And there's like, I mean, thinking back to the first record, and there's a lot of strings on that record, and it's very folk and very lush. The new stuff that I'm hearing, there's this kind of electronic undercurrent happening through some of like this kind of loop that happens in Tough Kid. Like I don't have the language to describe it, but there's an electronic kind of a loop that's running through that song.
Yeah, like there's synths galore for sure.
All through that. And it's like, did you hear that going in, or was this something that came as through the recording process? Like, why don't we try that?
Yeah, I think Hawk kind of like pushed me into trying it because I wasn't as savvy with that myself. And actually, so we wrote this like handful of songs, and there was definitely like synth parts in it that like, because he's a whiz on that kind of stuff, and just like the layering and the the counter melodies and things like that, just like blew my mind. And then from there we were like, okay, this is a record, I'm not sure. Are these the songs? I'm not sure. So I went to this place that I often go when I'm looking to write, and it's what used to be a cottage hospital in Western Newfoundland, in a place called Norris Point. And I don't think many people, if anybody, does residencies here, but I'm pals with the people who run the place, and it was an operable cottage hospital until 2001. And now there's there's like a hostel, there's a radio station in the basement.
Wow.
There's people doing massage therapy and things, community kitchen, community garden.
Cool.
And I was allowed to, it was so lovely. Like they welcome me anytime. Shout out to Joni Cranston, who's wonderful. But it's just like, it's this place that's steeped in story. I feel connected to like, the place, even though my family was from more like the east, south coast of Newfoundland. But there is just such a like, there's such a story, and there's such a like the landscape around there is so grand. Like it's right in Grossmore National Park. And so I got to stay there for another week and a half or so, and 2 weeks, and just try stuff out. And I had a MIDI keyboard that I hadn't used to write before. Wow. And I ended up writing a lot of songs using like synth lines and synth loops. And that was a cool thing to try out. So there's songs that actually haven't come out yet.
Oh, cool.
That were led by that. And so that was like a really cool, like mind-opening moment for me. So I'm like very stoked on, just seeing where it's gone and like where it could go.
You're all crackly right now, which is fun. No, I don't mean vocally. I mean your energy is all like I can tell I can tell you're really stoked on the stuff that you're producing. Yeah. And it's really what you've released recently. There's a lot of ambition in it that's really exciting to see. Not that there wasn't ambition in your other stuff, but I can tell you're pushing boundaries these days with stuff, right?
Might as well.
That's great. Like that's really exciting. And I can tell it's really exciting for you. And so what I'm hearing lately is terrific. I freaking love Tough Kid. I keep banging on Tough Kid, but
I'm glad.
There's something in that song that just really, I like a lot of your songs, but that one in particular just got me recently. It's a vibe.
Thank you.
I can't describe it beyond it's a vibe.
It's a grinding groove.
It really
I love
is.
playing it live. I feel like people really react to it in a movement sense as well. Sure. Like it really like Like as soon as that song starts going, like Chris goes on the drums.
You have to
and
move.
then the like that first thing hits and everybody's like standing there and then they're like, oh,
You
here I
have to
go.
move. It just picks you up, and it's so great. It's
Which I
really-
love. Like I've shied away from groove in my
Really?
writing, and I think like I definitely like my comfort zones are like the tender soft and then the rock and like either wall of sound like Death of Me
Yeah, I
or
see.
like the kind of like frenetic punk adjacent
right.
kind of thing. So it's like this groove center is almost like, oh my God, like where
It goes over here, and you go, oh, what's this now? This is different. And then some keyboard stuff comes in.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, we haven't even talked about the Weakerthans, and we should.
I was wondering what the influence was, and
That
I was
was
like,
the one.
That's awesome.
I love the Weakerthans. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. And when I read out there that you're a big Weakerthans fan, I thought, oh,
Huge.
Skye and I are we're gonna get on just fine.
Oh.
Actually, the fourth episode of this podcast, 2019. You're gonna be episode 201, by the way.
Wow.
Episode 4 was Jason Tate, the drummer from the Weakerthans.
Really?
Yes, it was.
That's cool.
He was in town. He was playing with Bahamas at that point.
Oh, cool.
And I threw him a Hail Mary. It's like, dude, I'm starting this podcast. He's one of the influences on me as a drummer, maybe the influence.
No kidding. Yeah.
And I just threw a Hail Mary, like, any chance? And I didn't expect to hear from him at all. And then 2 days later, I'm sitting down with him, and it was like one of the great moments, you know?
Cool.
And I love that band, and I love that you love that band.
Yeah. What an anomaly. I feel like
Right?
if you know them, you know them. And like they occupy this space that I think it's so intriguing because it doesn't, it's one of those ones where it's like, what is it? And I try to describe it to people who haven't heard it before. It's like, well, it's literary lyrics, but also very, and it's very brittle emotionally and like very micro moments in like the mundanity of human existence that are so precious, but also it's like kind of punk adjacent, you know, like this is the kind of like elements of everything. And for me, they were, you know, I found them.
No, go on.
I was looking for the band, like, I don't know if anybody remembers this, like, it was like kind of, were they like a kind of hardcore, like post-punk band from Kitchener or from Toronto called The Reason. I was looking for The Reason on Kazaa or LimeWire or whatever. And
oh, wow. Now
it was
we're going back.
Yeah. And like, I picked a file that was like, I was like, The Reason, that's great. And it was The Reasons.
The Reasons.
By the Weakerthans. And I was like, what's this? This is not what I like this.
This is good, right?
Yeah. And then from there, I think favorite band status for sure. I was actually just playing them last night, just like acoustically. I was playing some Weakerthans songs, and actually, I've really made like a reconnection with them with my guitarist Jason. He and I have really started just like we just jam and sing sometimes, and Weakerthans is our like connective tissue.
That's where you meet.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you should probably try to work up a collab with John K. Samson.
I would literally die. I think.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I revere him for sure. I revere him. So that would be crazy. I mean, I don't know the details, and you know, I'm sure that there's so much more than just like reunion to get sorted for this to happen. But like, would love a Weakerthans reunion.
Well, look, Jason Tate told me in that interview that the Weakerthans are not over. They're on a hiatus, but officially they're not over. So,
oh my God.
And I mean, he played on John K's, at least one of his solo records. It's like they're still connected.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I love his solo records as well. They're
awesome. I mean, he's just a songwriter at the very highest level. And his lyrics are just stunning.
Yeah.
They're just stunning.
Yeah. They take the breath right out of your lungs.
Yeah. And I've seen them live a bunch, and they're just so great. And you talk about a guy who doesn't necessarily sing in a trained or classical way, but it works absolutely perfectly for that music, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of artists that revere them, that like they've been a source of solace, and
Yeah.
it's something that they can always listen to be like, oh, this is what music is all about.
Well, you should listen to that episode because Jason
I
talks a
will.
lot about the formative parts of the band and then touring
Cool.
in the how rough it was and like
Yeah. Because they went all over. Like
oh
they were big in Australia for a bit too.
yeah, just like get in the it's not even a van sometimes, it's just like
Yeah.
get in the car and go
Get
on
in
the
the
road.
car.
Like the real deal DIY indie rock story is the Weakerthans, and what a great
Yeah.
band. And
Absolutely.
I mean, I wanted to talk to you about Germany. we don't have a lot of time left, but I saw somewhere along the way that you played the Reeperbahn Festival in Hamburg,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it brings a smile to my face because I've played on the Reeperbahn several times.
What's up.
At Cowboy and Indiana. I don't know if you looked closely.
No.
Your face just lit up a little bit. There's this amazing sort of dangerous club right on the Reeperbahn in Hamburg.
Okay.
For those who don't know, the Reeperbahn is among the more notorious streets in Europe.
It's
For
wild.
every vice you could possibly imagine is available to you on the Reeperbahn. There's this club right in the heart of it called Cowboy and Indiana. It's run by a giant called Sven. And it's got a big yellow sign right out front, Cowboy in Indiana. And I've toured over there quite a bit with an artist called Sarah Smith. And we used to play Cowboy in Indiana every time
my
we went over
God.
there. And the Reeperbahn is like your head is on a swivel, but what an entertaining sort of a place to be.
Wild.
I know another band that got shook down on the Reeperbahn. They went by this strip club, I think, and the girls were enticing them to come in. And so in they went, being young and naive from America, and they didn't leave before some dudes in suits shook them down for all the money they had in their pockets. You know what I mean? It's that sort of a place.
Yeah, for sure. That
I
makes
laughed
sense.
when I saw that kind of your first experience in Europe was the Reeperbahn Festival.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, yeah, because I had done. So how did I find out about? I first went to Reeperbahn in 2018, and I was on tour. In my process with touring, I do a lot of like fact finding missions by touring solo first. So
that's what you do, sure.
Yeah, I'd done like a bunch of like solo touring in Italy, largely because that was where I first got my start. I first made contact with an agent via friends, that kind of thing, who set me up with tours. But then in 2018, I think this was like my second time venturing into like Germany. I was doing a tour with my friend Nick Fay from Regina, Saskatchewan, who's an amazing songwriter, maybe one of my favorites in the world. And we were just kicking around. And so we were in Germany. We actually went to Poland. We did a Polish tour that was like very different from anything I'd ever done and very cool. And we ended up at Reeperbahn because Nick was playing. And so we sang some songs together. I was dating somebody who was like a member of one of the provincial music industry associations. So like we were hanging out and it was great, but it was like, that was my first experience there. And I actually had a really beautiful experience where I was hanging out at the Canada House, which if you haven't been to Reeperbahn, there's this one place. It used to be called Cocoon. Now I think it's called like Huva or something.
Could be.
But it's the place where all the Canadians showcase. And even, there's lots of other places to showcase as well, but that's the spot for Canadian music. And so I was just hanging out there the whole time. And I got to know like the production manager and the people doing sound and lighting at the venue. And we were just like broing down and hanging out. And we were like, we got along really well. And then they all listened to both mine and Nick's music after the fact and kept in touch. And then I played Reeperbahn with my band the next year. And the most beautiful thing happened where we were playing Canada House, and the sound person and the lighting people, because they were the same as the year before, that was like this was their spot, this was their room, and they knew the songs well enough to cut to black at the end of songs.
Oh, wow.
And like, not, it was like a revolving door. Like everybody has a 30-minute set and you've never met anybody here before. So you better throw and go kind of festival thing.
Of course.
And we had this like perfectly timed, just like everything was exactly how it should be. They knew the songs. They knew the words to the songs.
Amazing.
And so like that in and of itself is such a, like, that's a classic German touring experience where it's
Yeah.
like you go and the appreciation and the care, like they really look after you. Whereas here it's like, you know, drink tickets. What do you mean? Why are you here?
And people come.
Sometimes
People show up at
people
the gig too,
come
right?
and they
What?
like drive to come and they like come because they found you online randomly by themselves. And like, there's less of a block
Yeah.
of trying something new, which is really cool.
There seems to be more of a go out and hear music culture generally over
Yeah.
there, I think, than here. The
Yeah, for sure.
Cowboy in Indiana, I don't think has lights you can turn off. The stage is there's like an L-shaped bar, and the quote unquote stage, which is just the floor, is
Yeah.
in front of it. So people are literally sitting beside you, and like it's a wild joint. I can remember these girls pouring shots down the guitar player's throat as he's playing, and people are like stepping on his pedal board, and it's just a wild joint, and it's so
Amazing.
We've played other places in Hamburg too,
Yeah.
but yeah, Cowboy in Indiana,
My
man, oh, man.
God.
And you also, this is just nostalgia for me, but I read you talking about the city of Marburg somewhere along the way.
I love Marburg.
I have such wonderful memories of Marburg, Germany.
Really?
What a beautiful, beautiful,
So beautiful.
medieval city that is. It's like,
yeah,
you go to the old part of the city and it's like walking through Disney.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
There's actually the tower that you can see on the horizon is the tower that was the inspiration for the Rapunzel Tower in Aesop's Fables. Like the guy who drew all of the original pictures, like that was the tower that he drew. So that's Rapunzel's tower. Like it's crazy.
It's just I love Germany so much.
Yeah,
and I've been lucky to spend time there.
Yeah. Another cool thing about Marburg is the like the cave system.
Yeah.
Have you seen like because like it's all on this for people who don't know about it, it's all on this mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And like all of the storefronts like back into the mountain. And so like the place that we played is called Q. And it's a really cool, like very DIY, very like, I don't know, awesome space. And behind the stage, you open these doors and it's just a cave. Amazing. And people just used to like, keep their preserves back there or whatever. It was like a fridge, basically.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's scary. It's a cave.
Yeah.
There's dark corners and like maybe demons, who knows? But it's really cool. I love
hopefully.
Caves, so
yeah, Germany. I miss it. I miss it. Right. The last time I toured anywhere was there in 2021, and it's been a while now. I miss
Time
it.
to get back.
I would love to. I would go tomorrow if the opportunity presented itself.
Yeah.
And maybe it will.
Yeah.
I want to run two more questions by you, and we can do them very, very quick. There's another quote that I'm looking for where you talked about in an interview somewhere. You said, see yourself through the eyes of your younger self, you said at some point. And so I ask you, what would your younger self see in Skye Wallace today?
That's a good question. I think it is really important to take a step back because I think we can all get so close to everything in this life and not, I mean, I guess it's a practice of gratitude in a sense as well, because like put yourself in the shoes. Like for me, my version of that is like, I started touring when I was 19 and doing very DIY, like very like incorrect ways of doing things, but like kind of ballsy looking back and like putting yourself in those shoes and looking at where you're at now and all the things that you've done. And like, would you be excited about that? Yeah, I think your younger self would be just flabbergasted by what you have been able to accomplish and where you're at. And like, maybe it's not the same thing as what you were expecting that age. That's not the point. It's about like seeing the journey that you've been on to get to this point and like, and honoring that journey and honoring who you've become, who you've been. I think there's a song from like my previous record, Terribly Good, it's called Truth Be Told. And it's very much about like looking back on all the versions of yourself with softness, because we're so inclined to look back with judgment because it's like, oh, I've changed. I've made mistakes. I'm this and it's like, I think it's important to acknowledge how much you've learned and also give yourself grace for those times where you were lost or, you were just on your way to figuring out what it is that you needed and wanted to do and ended up here where you can, look back and see that change and see that difference. But it's also like, yeah, finding the softness for those versions of yourself, because they are all pieces of where you are. I think is really important.
That's great. The last question is, what next? What's coming up?
Well, what next? Yeah. So I've got it's actually being announced next week. So I've got a tour of Ontario coming up in the fall.
Are you coming to London, Ontario?
I will be coming to London.
All right. Good.
So stay tuned for that announcement. And then I guess, you heard it here first, but there's going to be a record coming out on November 1st.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, and several singles to come, as well as I just got back yesterday from filming a horror movie music video for one of the songs. So stay tuned for that, because I was covered in blood in the woods for a couple days. So
that's intriguing.
Yeah, I'm excited, and also trying to like put some stuff together for the States in the new year. So that's exciting. I've been a couple times, but I think I need to implement that fact finding thing I mentioned earlier, where it's like I'm gonna go do like a 6-week tour solo and see where it makes the most sense to include as a circuit. Like where is my audience, that kind of thing. And I haven't, I've played some cool festivals in the States, but never a tour. And I just think in order to get to that sustainable place for me, it's like, oh, let's do this thing that I've been doing since I was younger, and it's just putting yourself out there and taking the leap and trying it out and see what sticks. So I'm going to do that in the States, because it's really hard to break into the States. And so like maybe there's a way of, finding a bit of a base, by finding a bit of an audience and foundation, even just contacts for future shows. Like, so stay tuned. If you're in the States, I'll be venturing.
Let's hope there's still a States to venture to by this time.
Next
year. Let's not go there. Skye Wallace, what a treat this was. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Very wonderful conversation. And thank you for your insight into art and bringing your own takes and experiences and vulnerabilities. I think it's a really beautiful place to be speaking from and speaking with you from. So thank you. Thank you for the thoughtfulness, and yeah, you're wonderful.
Stay on the line, but for now, say goodbye, Skye Wallace.
Bye. Love you.
Thank you.